Hello, forensic science students. I am Mr. Williams, and today we're going to be discussing forensic drug chemistry. So, forensic drug chemistry is simply the chemistry that is applied to the identification of illegal substances. I guess this could spill over to non-illegal substances because many things are regulated, but then again, um, if you're not doing the right things, if something's regulated, it's all of a sudden illegal. So, maybe that still applies. Drug analysis is based on chemical properties that are unique to the substance being tested for. So, how does it interact with an acid? How does it interact with a base? What's its um, ability to chemically react with another substance? pH, things like that. Forensic chemists analyze samples of unknown materials, including powders, liquids, and stains, to determine the chemical identity of a compound. And so there's a lot of variable things. So it could be residues, or it could be a large quantity, or very small quantity. You could be just tested for, you know, wipe the inside of a baggie with a towel or a swab, and then test the swab. There are drug tests where you can have a little wet wipe, and then you can just rub somebody's fingers, and you can determine if they've been smoking marijuana, for example. And a lot of these tests are very cheap. I often remind parents when I talk to them that drug tests can be purchased locally at the Dollar Tree for literally $1. So at the top right, we got a white mysterious powder. What do you think that powder is? You say powdered sugar? Yeah, because I just found an image powdered sugar. But evidence samples often contain a mixture of substances due to drug dealers cutting the drug with other substances. So they buy amount of material. Drug dealers are either drug addicts or selfish and greedy, and so they will mix in other materials. I have been in a forensic drug lab before, and things like laxatives were put into drugs, things like baby formula, uh, baby powder, vitamins, Epsom salts, and just all kinds of things were put into those drugs because they just want to make more of a profit. Biological samples such as urine and blood often rely on detecting metabolites of a drug that has been ingested. Metabolites are substances created by the body in reaction to the presence of the drug. So it's what the drug had transformed into, or something that your body created only to get rid of this one molecule or one drug. And so it does say that urine and blood are used to detect the metabolites of drugs that have been ingested. Now, don't get too hung up on that word ingested, but the same thing if it has been injected or absorbed through the skin or inhaled, that all applies there too. Then there's other types of drugs that you don't sample for the metabolite, you sample for the drug itself. So when we're talking about cocaine, heroin, or caffeine, you would test the actual properties of the substance itself in the urine or blood or sweat or whatever else. So there's four interpretations of a drug test. So you go in, you are trying to get a job at a really nice place. This is a place you want, and so they're gonna drug test you. So you take a drug test. There's four outcomes. One is a true positive. The test correctly detects the presence of a drug. So if you had drugs in your system because you have been consuming drugs, and then you got drug tested and they found it, that's called a true positive. A false positive is when the test incorrectly detects the presence of a drug when no drug is present. You're going in there, you are clean, you have not been doing anything you shouldn't have been doing, and they're just like, sorry, you don't have the job, you failed your drug test. Uh, no, I didn't. Right? That would be a false positive. They said you failed, and no, you didn't fail. Just something happened, and they think you did. And we'll talk about some things that cause that to happen, and we've already been assigned an article that discussed that. True negative, the test correctly confirms the absence of drug. You walk in and you do your drug test, and lo and behold, it comes out that you do not have drugs in your system because, in fact, you don't do drugs and you don't have drugs in your system. So it's true that you're negative. Then there is a false negative, and that is when the test fails to detect the presence of a drug when it is present. So somebody has drugs in their system, and for whatever reason, the test wasn't performed correctly, or there was an error in some way, and they missed it. They said you were clean when in fact that was not the case. So that's what a false negative is. I do put a question on these on assignments and quizzes, so make sure you know them. There's two types of testing. You have a presumptive and confirmatory test. And so these two tests are used to determine whether an illegal substance is present. Okay, so let's think. If you presume that something is true, it's an assumption. It's like, okay, all right, yeah, I mean, I have to check into this a little bit more, but that seems about right. Confirmatory test is, I suspected that this was happening, and indeed, here's my absolute 100% can't deny it proof. Okay, so that's the difference between confirmatory and presumptive tests, but we're going to talk about it more. So, presumptive tests, the test is less precise and indicates that an illegal substance may be present. Not that it is, it might be. The test is often conducted by law enforcement at the scene. The presence of a substance is often indicated by a change in color. And so, in the top right, we have a commercial product that would chemically react with methamphetamine, that's speed or crystal meth. And it also reacts with MDMA because they are similar substances in chemical reactivity and composition. So you'd put that material in there, you would crack the glass vial open, and if it turns blue, that would be a presumptive positive test to say, yep, that is what we think it is. It's time to do more tests. And so false positives are not uncommon here, and you do need to do additional testing. And so the reason why presumptive tests are done is because they're cheap. They can be done quickly. They do not require a lot of training. Yeah, and so this would be enough to have you arrested and charged with the substance, but it is not enough to necessarily convict you, right? Because if this was the case, your lawyer would want to move on to something called confirmatory testing, as we'll talk about in a moment. And presumptive tests only give qualitative results. They say it's there, it's not there. They don't say how much it is. They don't talk about the weight, the amount, no details. It's just like it is or it is not. And down below, you see like a drug test where they just dip the strip in urine and it tests for multiple types of substances. And if it turns a certain color, if a certain square turns a certain color, it would be a positive or negative result for those substances in the urine. Confirmatory tests provide a definitive identification of the substance in question. So, is this a substance? It is absolutely 100%. Beyond a shadow of a doubt. We thought it was, and it actually is. You're not going to fool this test. They're expensive. They use usually some expensive equipment and require some highly specialized training to do so. So down below, something I'm trained in is called HPLC, High Performance Liquid Chromatography. We talked about that last semester. And we see a chromatogram, which is just basically a graph of that HPLC. And this is a chromatogram of marijuana. And so we see a couple of cannabinoid compounds, which cannabinoids are just all the different active ingredients in marijuana. So, and we're able to identify these different spikes as particular components of marijuana. So we have CBN, we have THC, and we have THCA, and there is a variety and a lot of different cannabinoids that could be found here. Let me just caution you on this because now a lot of research is coming out because some states have it legal for medicine, some states have it legal for recreation, and I just want to caution you because there's a big following that some people think that marijuana is just like the elixir of life and it will cure cancer and like it can't hurt you, it's just natural. Well, tobacco is natural. It obviously hurts you. Poison ivy is natural. It obviously can hurt you. So I caution you this because there are a lot of people who can make a lot of money by getting you to purchase this stuff in the future. And so they're going to have money to advertise and try to get you to believe a certain way about it just so they can profit off you. I caution you on this. It is not a cure for cancer like most people believe. But that's it's a deep discussion because people will pull up articles say, look, THC kills cancer. Well, they grew cancer in a petri dish and it was only one individual cell, not in the body, and they just poured all this stuff on there, and they're like, "Look, it killed it." Well, in the same way, bleach would kill cancer in the exact same way, but bleach is not going to cure cancer. So just be careful with that. So I want to get back to the confirmatory test. So again, they provide a definitive identification. It's absolutely there. Um, they rely on instrument analysis. They compare the results of known illegal substances. So how do they know this spike is, for example, CBN? Well, they take some known amount of CBN, they run the same test on it, and that little spike appears at the same spot. And it's qualitative and quantitative results. So it's qualitative because it says, look, that's CBN, look, that's THC. It's quantitative because you can find the area under the spike and compare it to known amounts and find a ratio of how much it's there. And you can say, hey, this is 10%, 9%, 5% THCA, or what have you. Okay, weight tests. So weight tests, just a determination of the weight of the substance. You just put it on a scale and you see how much is there. And weight of illicit substances often determines the severity of the punishment. So, like how much trouble you get in is often, move this out of the way, uh, how much trouble you get in is often based upon how much is there. So, in Kentucky, um, possession of marijuana can get you 45 days in jail and a $250 fine if you have less than 8 ounces. And that all depends on your prosecutor and your community because they have sometimes they use different guidelines. But this is what the law says can't be done. And then sale or trafficking is sale, like you have it, you're giving it to other people. And you can see that, let's go with the first offenses. So if you have less than 8 ounces, so that's about a half pound, it's a misdemeanor and you can go to jail for 1 year and they'll give you a $500 fine. Well, if it's over a half pound, right, and it's like 8 to 5 pounds, it's a felony and you can do 1 to 5 years and a $10,000 fine. And the only difference is the amount that you had. So penalties for marijuana are based on weight and other substances as well. So presumptive tests used to narrow down the types of confirmatory tests used. And so we have microscope analysis, so basically a microscope. So this test would look at the structure of the material to make an initial estimate as to what it may be. And this is most suitable for plant material. I visited a crime lab in college. I had an advisor who worked there. And so we were looking at marijuana under the microscope, and it looks a lot like this. And what she would do is she would identify different biological characteristics of marijuana, and she would just check a list. And I don't remember all of her things. I just remember there's one thing called trichomes. She would check it, and you would check. There's like a special name of like these little hairs that are on there, and if you got so many of those boxes checked, then that was enough evidence to do the more expensive testing and do further testing. And if those things were not there, they wouldn't even waste time doing the other tests. The ultraviolet spectroscopy, just another test. It works by exposing material to UV light, ultraviolet light, to see how it absorbs the UV light. Different chemicals absorb UV light differently. And the test is not completely reliable because different amounts of substance can absorb similar amounts of UV light. So two things can absorb the same amount of UV light. But after you do this test and you say, well, hey, this absorbs the same UV light as marijuana. It's like, okay, well, let's do the next test. It already passed the microscope test. It passed the UV test. So let's do another test that will absolutely tell us what it is. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. And in the next class, we will talk a little bit more about drugs, drug laws, and yeah, how they're tested. All right, have a nice day.